Solving quadratic equations in one variable by taking the square root. Remember, to square a number means multiply it by itself. So 4 squared is 16. Negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. 0.6 times 0.6 is 36 hundredths. 3/4 squared is 9/16. When we take the square root of 36x squared, we're taking the square root of 36, which is 6, and then x. The square root of 25 is 5. There is no real solution from the square root of negative 4 because no number times itself equals negative 4. 50 is not a perfect square, but we can simplify it by rewriting it as the square root of 25 times 2. The square root of 25 is 5, radical 2. Now let's take this information and this knowledge and let's solve some quadratic equations. The first example says some number when you square it is 25. Well, x could either equal 5 or negative 5, because negative 5, when you square it, will also equal 25. The strategy that we'll use to solve this equation is to take the square root of both sides. But remember, we want plus or minus on the right-hand side when it comes to solving quadratic equations. So x equals plus or minus 5. On example B, when we take the square root of both sides, we know that there is no real solution because the square root of negative 16 does not exist among the real numbers. Now, something a little bit more complicated is x squared plus 3 equals 42. First, let's isolate the variable by subtracting 3 from both sides. Now we'll take the square root of both sides and we get x equals plus or minus 7. Example B, we'll add 100 to both sides and we will divide by 4 and we get x squared equals 25. When we take the square root of both sides, we get x equals plus or minus 5. So this is convenient when the number inside the radical is a perfect square. But in these examples, when we take the square root of 40, that is not a perfect square. So we need to rewrite 40 as some perfect square times something else. So we'll call it 4 times 10. The square root of 4 is 2. So there are two solutions to this quadratic equation, plus or minus 2 radical 10. Example B, let's add 24 to both sides. Let's divide by 8, and we get x squared equals 15.5. When we take the square root of both sides, we get x equals plus or minus the square root of 15.5, which with a calculator would give you about 3.937. Now a word problem. Mark covered a cube with 864 square inches of self-stick vinyl. What is the side length of the cube? So we'll start with the formula for the surface area. S equals 6s squared. Now we'll substitute the 864 for the surface area. Let's divide by 6 to both sides. And we get that 144 equals s squared. When we take the square root of both sides, we get s equals plus or minus 12. But negative 12 wouldn't make sense in the context of this problem, so the answer is 12 inches.